The call to action. In a vast chamber adorned with shimmering stars and alien insignias, tension hung thick in the air. Delegates from various races gathered, their eyes fixed on Dr. Drayle, a Zork's representative whose voice trembled with desperation. He stood before the Galactic Council, pleading for aid as his homeworld faced annihilation at the hands of the ruthless crack slavers. The Zorks were a peaceful race, known for their vibrant culture and deep connection to their planet's ecosystem. But now, they were on the brink of extinction, their cries for help echoing through the council chambers like haunting specters. As Dr. Drayle's words fell upon deaf ears, it became painfully clear that many in attendance were more concerned with their own survival than with saving an ally. Among them sat Admiral John Hawkins of Earth, a seasoned leader with a reputation for bravery that often bordered on recklessness. He felt a fire ignite within him as he listened to Dr. Drayle's heartfelt plea, his heart pounding against his chest like a war drum. While others shifted uncomfortably in their seats or cast furtive glances at one another, Hawkins stood tall, his resolve hardening like steel. "The Zorks will not fall," he declared, his voice resonating through the chamber like thunder. Not while humans still draw breath. His proclamation was met with gasps and murmurs of disbelief from delegates who had long dismissed humanity as inexperienced and naive. With determination etched across his face, Hawkins slammed a fist onto his console, sending ripples through the gathered assembly. "Earth sends her fleets. We fly now for Zorks." His words ignited a spark among some of the human representatives present. They understood what was at stake. The Velari and rear delegates exchanged skeptical glances, muttering about policies and risks involved in aiding another race. Their whispers were laced with contempt for what they deemed reckless bravado from Earth's young leaders. But Hawkins remained undeterred. He had witnessed too much suffering in his time to turn away when help was needed most. As he turned to Dr. Drayle, he could see hope flickering in the Zorks' eyes, a light that had nearly been extinguished by despair. "How many ships can we expect?" Hawkins asked, knowing well that Earth's forces were stretched thin across distant sectors. Dr. Drayle hesitated, his antennae drooping slightly as he spoke. "I cannot say for certain, but any number would be appreciated." His voice cracked under the weight of his grief. "However many we need to get the job done," Hawkins promised firmly, gripping Dr. Drayle's shoulder with conviction. "We will save Zorks or die trying." With that vow echoing in their minds, Hawkins stormed out of the council chambers, barking orders into his comms as he marched towards the hangar bay where his flagship awaited. The U.S. Deliverance. This vessel was not just any ship. It was humanity's pride, equipped with cutting-edge technology and weaponry designed for battle against formidable foes. As he walked briskly through the corridors bustling with crew members preparing for departure, Hawkins felt an electric thrill course through him, a mix of fear and excitement at what lay ahead. He knew this mission would not be easy. Failure meant not only loss for the Zorks, but also potential doom for humanity itself if they faced off against the cracks alone. "Captain Thompson," Hawkins called out as he entered the control room aboard Deliverance. The captain was a veteran officer whose face bore lines etched by years spent navigating treacherous space battles. "Admiral," Thompson replied crisply, standing at attention before relaying vital information about their current status. "We're readying all systems for launch. Shuttles are being prepped as we speak." Hawkins nodded appreciatively, but felt an undercurrent of urgency coursing through him. "We need to move quickly. Every second counts." He turned to face his crew, who looked back at him with a mixture of admiration and trepidation. "Prepare for warp jump," he ordered decisively. "And send word through the fleet. Any captain with guts needs to rendezvous at our location." As they hurtled through warp space towards Zorks, Hawkins paced restlessly on the bridge, mentally preparing himself for what awaited them on arrival. He couldn't shake off an unsettling feeling that time was running out for their allies. Meanwhile, Dr. Drayle remained aboard Deliverance alongside Hawkins as they approached Zorks' orbit, a planet now shrouded in darkness from looming threats above it. The sight unsettled him, Vibrant landscapes that once thrived were now marred by shadows cast by enemy ships, circling like vultures waiting to feast on despair. "Admiral," Thompson interrupted Hawkins' thoughts as he monitored incoming data on his console. "We'll be dropping out of warp in 2 minutes. Prepare weapons systems," Hawkins commanded sharply as adrenaline surged through him once more. A moment later, they emerged from warp space into chaos. An armada of crack ships loomed ominously above Zork's surface, firing indiscriminately upon any resistance below them, while ground forces engaged in fierce combat against desperate Zork's defenders, fighting valiantly to protect their home. "Fire torpedoes," Hawkins shouted over alarms blaring throughout Deliverance as he watched enemy vessels erupt into fiery explosions across screens before him, each victory fueling his determination further still. The human fleet surged forward into battle formation alongside Deliverance, a testament to humanity's resilience, even when faced with overwhelming odds against them. As waves of missiles launched towards enemy ships amidst blaring alarms, signaling danger all around them, Hawkins felt hope surge within him once again. They would not allow fear or cowardice to dictate their actions today. The battle raged fiercely above Zorks as both sides fought tooth and nail, the stakes higher than ever before. But one thing remained clear. Humanity's courage had ignited hope where none existed before. With each explosion lighting up space like fireworks celebrating newfound alliances forged amidst adversity, their resolve only strengthened by witnessing firsthand what true bravery looked like when faced against insurmountable odds gathering the fleet. As the U.S. Deliverance soared through the void of space, Admiral John Hawkins felt a sense of urgency coursing through him. The fate of the Zorks hung in the balance, and he was determined to gather every resource he could muster for their rescue. The ship's bridge was alive with activity. Officers moved swiftly, relaying commands and monitoring systems as they approached their destination. Preparing for battle. "Admiral will be arriving at Zork's orbit in approximately 10 minutes, Captain James Thompson reported, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. Hawkins nodded, his mind racing with strategies and contingencies. He knew that they were not only fighting for the Zorks, but also for their own survival against the cracks. "Prepare all fighter squadrons for launch," Hawkins ordered. "We need to establish air superiority before we send down ground teams." The crew sprang into action, each member aware of the stakes involved. As they neared Zorks, Hawkins took a moment to gaze out at the swirling colors of the planet below. It was a world rich with life and beauty, now marred by the shadows of war. He thought of Dr. Drayle and the desperate plea he had made before the Galactic Council. The Zorks deserved better than this fate, and he would ensure they received the help they needed. The crew comes together. In the hangar bay, preparations were underway for deploying shuttles and fighters. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation as pilots suited up and mechanics checked equipment. Hawkins took a moment to speak with some of his crew members, knowing that their morale would be crucial in the coming battle. "Lieutenant Sarah Kim," he called out, spotting one of his best pilots. She turned, her eyes bright with determination. "Are you ready for this?" "Always, Admiral," she replied confidently. "We'll show those cracks what humans are made of." Her enthusiasm was infectious, and Hawkins felt a renewed sense of hope. He moved on to speak with Sergeant Mark Rice, a seasoned ground commander who had fought in several skirmishes against alien forces. "Mark, I need you to lead our ground teams once we breach the surface," Hawkins instructed. Rice nodded, his expression serious. "We'll hold the line for our allies, sir. They won't fall while we're there." His words echoed Hawkins' own resolve. Rallying allies. As preparations continued, Hawkins knew that they needed more than just their own forces. They required allies willing to join them in this fight against oppression. He activated his comms system to send out a message to any nearby human ships. "This is Admiral John Hawkins of the U.S. Deliverance," he broadcasted. "We are en route to assist our Zorks allies against an overwhelming Cracks force. Any ship within range is requested to join us at Zork's orbit. Together, we can turn the tide." The response was immediate. Several ships from Earth's fleet acknowledged his call, eager to join the fight. Each vessel represented not just military might, but also a shared commitment to protect those who could not defend themselves. Unexpected challenges. Just as Hawkins began to feel optimistic about their chances, alarms blared throughout the ship. The sensor officer's voice cut through the chatter on the bridge. "Admiral, we have incoming vessels. Crack's reinforcements are approaching." Hawkins' heart sank as he realized that time was running out. "All hands to battle stations," he ordered sharply. "Prepare for engagement." The crew sprang into action once more as they readied themselves for combat against an enemy that had already claimed countless lives. Hawkins felt adrenaline surge through him as he took his position at the command console. "Captain Thompson," he said firmly, "we need to intercept those reinforcements before they reach Yorks." Thompson nodded resolutely as he relayed orders to engage their weapons systems. "Weapons primed and ready, Admiral." The first engagement. The U.S. Deliverance shook slightly as it fired its powerful mass drivers at the approaching Crack ships. Explosions lit up space as enemy vessels erupted into fiery debris under their assault. "Keep targeting their engines," Hawkins shouted over the din of battle sounds surrounding him. "We can't let them escape." The human fleet moved in formation around Deliverance, each ship firing in unison as they engaged with precision and determination. The Crack's forces were fierce but disorganized. They had not anticipated such a swift response from humanity. "Admiral, we're taking heavy fire," one of the crew members yelled as alarms blared again throughout the ship. "Divert power from non-essential systems to shields," Hawkins commanded without hesitation. He understood that every second counted. They needed to protect themselves long enough to ensure victory. A moment of doubt. As chaos unfolded around them, doubt crept into Hawkins' mind for just a moment. Was this all worth it? Would humanity truly be able to make a difference? But then he thought back to Dr. Drail's pleading eyes and remembered why they were fighting. Not just for themselves, but for those who could not fight back. "Focus on your training," he yelled at his crew as if sensing their wavering spirits. "Remember why we're here. We fight for freedom." His words seemed to resonate with them. He could see determination return to their faces as they pushed forward against overwhelming odds. Victory and loss. After what felt like an eternity of combat, Hawkins watched as several Crack ships began to retreat under intense pressure from human firepower. Cheers erupted on board Deliverance. They had achieved their first victory. But just then, a massive Crack's warship emerged from behind asteroids, a dark behemoth bristling with weapons that dwarfed even Deliverance itself. Hawkins felt dread wash over him as it opened fire on their fleet. "Brace for impact," he shouted as explosions rocked the ship once more. In that moment of chaos and destruction, Hawkins understood that this battle was far from over. It was only just beginning. Rallying together. Despite losses and injuries among their ranks, hope flickered within him like a candle in darkness. Their resolve would not falter easily. As they regrouped after repelling Crack's reinforcements successfully, Hawkins gathered his officers on deck once again, determined to strategize effectively moving forward into deeper conflict ahead. "Listen up. We've made progress today," he began passionately addressing his crew members who had fought valiantly alongside him thus far, each face reflecting resilience, forged through adversity together. "But we're facing greater challenges ahead." He continued outlining plans for future engagements, while emphasizing teamwork among humans and Zork's defenders alike, knowing well that unity would be key if they were going to stand a chance against such formidable foes looming ahead. With renewed purpose igniting within them all, the crew prepared themselves mentally and physically for whatever awaited them next upon arriving at Zork's surface. The battle begins. As the U.S. Deliverance settled into orbit around Zork's, the tension on the bridge was palpable. Admiral John Hawkins stood at the command console, his heart racing at the sight of the chaos below. The Zork's capital city, once a vibrant hub of life and culture, was now engulfed in flames and despair. The Krak's forces were relentless, their ships circling like vultures over a dying prey. Preparing for ground assault. "Admiral, our shuttles are ready for launch," Captain James Thompson announced, his voice steady despite the urgency of the situation. "We have a clear path to the surface, but we need to move quickly before the Krak's regroup." "Let's not waste any time," Hawkins replied, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the tactical display. "We need to provide support to the Zork's defenders immediately." He turned to Dr. Drayle, who stood beside him, visibly shaken but resolute. "Are your people ready to fight?" Dr. Drayle nodded, his antennae twitching with determination. "They have been waiting for this moment. We will not let our world fall without a fight." With a shared sense of purpose, Hawkins and Dr. Drayle led the charge as they prepared to deploy ground teams. The shuttles were filled with Zork soldiers alongside human Marines, united in their mission to reclaim their home from the clutches of the Krak's. The descent. As the shuttles descended through Zork's atmosphere, Hawkins felt a mix of excitement and dread. The landscape below was a tapestry of destruction. Buildings crumbled under bombardment, and plumes of smoke rose like dark fingers reaching for the sky. The sounds of battle echoed in their ears as they approached the landing zone. "Prepare for landing," Hawkins shouted over the roar of engines. The shuttle shook violently as it touched down on a makeshift landing pad surrounded by debris and chaos. The doors opened with a hiss, and Hawkins led the charge out into the fray. The air was thick with acrid smoke, and the cries of wounded soldiers filled his ears. He quickly assessed their surroundings. Zork's defenders were engaged in fierce combat against Krak soldiers who advanced with brutal efficiency. "Joining forces. Form up," Hawkins barked to his team as they exited the shuttle. Zork's soldiers rallied around him, their eyes filled with determination. Together, they formed a defensive line against the oncoming Krak's forces. Dr. Drayle moved among his people, offering words of encouragement in their native tongue while translating key commands into English for Hawkins' troops. "We fight together. For Zorks," he shouted, igniting a fire within them. Hawkins raised his rifle and took aim at an approaching group of Krak soldiers, massive insectoid beings armed with energy weapons that crackled with deadly power. "On my mark," he yelled as adrenaline surged through him. The first clash. With a deafening roar, Hawkins fired his weapon, sending rounds flying toward the enemy ranks. His shots found their mark, striking down 2 Krak soldiers before they could react. The human Marines followed suit, unleashing a barrage of fire that tore through enemy lines. The Zork's fighters joined in with their own weapons, projectiles that burst forth in vibrant colors, adding to the chaos of battle. Together, they pushed back against the Krak's onslaught. But just as victory seemed within reach, a loud explosion rocked their position. A Krak's artillery unit had zeroed in on them from afar, sending debris flying in all directions. "Fall back! Fall back!" Hawkins shouted as he ducked behind cover. He could see several Zork's defenders go down under the blast. Their bravery would not be forgotten. Regrouping amidst chaos, as smoke cleared from the explosion, Hawkins took stock of his team. "Is everyone accounted for?" he asked urgently. "Sir, we have casualties," one Marine reported grimly, pointing toward fallen comrades who lay motionless on the ground. Hawkins felt a pang of anguish but pushed it aside. They had no time to mourn now. "We need to regroup and find a way to counterattack," he said firmly. Dr. Drayle approached him, determination etched across his features despite visible distress over his fallen kin. "We have hidden defenses in our city, artillery that can turn this tide if we can reach them." "Lead the way," Hawkins commanded without hesitation. The counterattack, with Dr. Drayle at the forefront guiding them through crumbling streets and alleyways littered with debris, they navigated toward an old Zork's military installation that had been largely untouched by initial assaults. As they approached their destination, a fortified structure adorned with ancient symbols, the sound of battle grew louder behind them. It was clear that Krak's forces were closing in fast. "Set up defenses here," Hawkins ordered as they reached safety within its walls. Prepare for another wave. Zork's soldiers worked quickly alongside human Marines to fortify their position. Barricades were erected using whatever materials were available. Metal scraps and crates piled high to create makeshift cover. Facing overwhelming odds, just as they finished reinforcing their defenses, an ominous silence fell over them. A momentary lull before chaos erupted once more as Crack's forces charged forward en masse. "Hold your ground," Hawkins shouted as he took position at a window overlooking the battlefield outside. The sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying, as waves upon waves of enemy soldiers approached like an unstoppable tide. The first shots rang out again, this time from both sides, as energy blasts illuminated darkened skies above them. Explosions rocked their makeshift stronghold while cries filled air around them, a cacophony that seemed to drown out everything else. Hawkins focused on keeping his team steady amidst chaos. Every shot fired mattered now more than ever. They had come too far to falter now. A moment of clarity. In that moment of intensity, a realization struck him like lightning. This was not just about saving Zorks or humanity. It was about forging bonds between species long divided by fear and misunderstanding. As he fired round after round into enemy ranks, his thoughts turned toward unity. Their combined strength could reshape destiny itself. Together, he roared above explosions echoing around them, his voice carrying weight through chaos. "We fight together, for freedom." His words ignited something deep within both humans and Zorks alike. Determination surged anew as they rallied together against overwhelming odds. The tide turns, with renewed vigor coursing through their veins. The combined forces unleashed hell upon approaching Crack's soldiers. Every shot fired became an act of defiance against tyranny, a testament to resilience that transcended species. As battle raged on outside, the tide began shifting slowly but surely. Each fallen enemy marked progress toward liberation, a flicker of hope igniting amidst despair. But just when victory seemed within reach, a new threat emerged from behind enemy lines. An elite squadron led by General Kazra, the ruthless commander known for his cunning tactics and brutal efficiency. Hawkins' heart raced at sight. The stakes had never been higher. They needed every ounce of strength left within them if they were going to stand against this formidable foe. Preparing for final confrontation. "Brace yourselves," Hawkins shouted as Kazra's forces charged forward. This would be their final stand against oppression. With weapons raised high, the united front prepared itself for what lay ahead. Together, they would face whatever challenges awaited them, even if it meant sacrificing everything. In that moment, they became more than just humans or Zorks. They became warriors fighting side by side for freedom, a legacy forged through bloodshed and bravery. As darkness loomed closer, hope flickered brightly amidst chaos, a reminder that even in dire times, unity could conquer all. The turning point. The battle raged on, a cacophony of destruction echoing across the war-torn surface of Zorks. Admiral John Hawkins lay on the ground, his vision blurred and his chest seeping blood. The pain was excruciating, but he fought to focus on the chaos around him. Zork soldiers and human Marines were locked in a desperate struggle against the Crack's forces, their lives hanging in the balance. A moment of desperation. "Admiral, stay with me." Dr. Drail's voice broke through the haze as he pressed his hands against Hawkins' wound, trying to stem the bleeding. The Zork's delegate was frantic, his eyes wide with fear for both Hawkins and his people. "I have to tell Thompson," Hawkins gasped, each word a struggle. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. If he didn't act soon, their chances of survival would dwindle. "Thompson knows what to do. We need you here," Dr. Drail insisted, his voice trembling with urgency. "You are our hope." Hawkins clenched his jaw, willing himself to rise. He couldn't let fear or pain dictate the outcome of this battle. With a deep breath, he pushed himself up, gritting his teeth against the agony that shot through him. Rallying the troops. "Listen up," Hawkins shouted, his voice hoarse but filled with determination. He raised his rifle despite the pain coursing through him. "We're not done yet. We fight for each other, Zorks and humans alike. Together, we can turn this around." The soldiers around him looked up, their expressions shifting from despair to renewed hope. They had witnessed their leader's resilience. It ignited a spark within them. "Form up. We need to push back against Khazra's forces," Hawkins commanded, rallying both Zorks and human fighters to regroup. As they formed a line of defense, Hawkins quickly assessed their situation. The cracks had been relentless, but they had also underestimated humanity's resolve. They were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for freedom and justice. The elite cracks forces. Meanwhile, General Khazra surveyed the battlefield from a distance, his cold eyes glinting with satisfaction as he watched the chaos unfold. The elite cracks forces had gained ground, and he relished the thought of crushing this rebellion once and for all. "Send in more drones," Khazra ordered his commanders. "Let them feel despair. Show them what happens when they defy us." As drones swarmed toward Hawkins' position like a plague of locusts, Hawkins felt a chill run down his spine. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but he refused to let fear take hold. A glimmer of hope. Suddenly, an idea struck him, a strategy that could shift the tide of battle in their favor. "We need to draw their fire away from our position," he said urgently to Dr. Drayle and Sergeant Mark Rice, who stood beside him. "If we can create a distraction," Rice suggested, "we might be able to flank them." Dr. Drayle nodded vigorously. "I can lead a small team to create chaos near their artillery units. If we can disable those weapons," Hawkins interrupted before he could finish. "Yes, that's it. We'll split our forces. Some will hold this line while others create a diversion." With renewed purpose, they quickly formulated a plan that would leverage their strengths against the cracks forces. Executing the plan. "All right," Hawkins said decisively. "Rays, take your squad and head toward their artillery units. Dr. Drayle will accompany you." "What about you?" Rice asked, concern etched on his face. "I'll stay here with the main force," Hawkins replied firmly. "We'll hold this line until you create enough chaos for us to push forward." With quick nods of understanding, Rice and Dr. Drayle gathered their team and moved out while Hawkins prepared for the incoming wave of crack soldiers. As they took position behind makeshift barricades, Hawkins felt adrenaline surge through him again. Their plan was risky but necessary if they were going to save Zorks. The chaos unleashed. Rice led his small team toward the enemy artillery units with stealth and precision. They moved through the ruins of Zorks' capital city like shadows, silent but determined. Once they reached their target, a cluster of cracks artillery pieces, Rice signaled for his team to spread out and prepare for an assault. "On my mark," he whispered as he watched the enemy soldiers patrol nearby. With a deep breath, Rice shouted, "Now." Explosions erupted as they opened fire on the artillery units. Chaos ensued as crack soldiers scrambled to respond. The distraction worked perfectly. Enemy fire shifted away from Hawkins' position as they focused on neutralizing this new threat. Turning point in battle. Back at Hawkins' location, he could see that their plan was working. The cracks were disoriented by Reyes' attack. "Now's our chance," he yelled to his troops as they surged forward together, Zorks and humans fighting side by side once more. As they pushed into enemy lines with newfound vigor, the tide began to turn. Each fallen crack soldier marked progress toward liberation. But just when victory seemed within reach, a new threat emerged from behind enemy lines. General Khazra himself charged into battle with elite soldiers at his side. Hawkins felt dread wash over him. This would be their most challenging fight yet, but he refused to back down. The final confrontation. "Hold your ground," Hawkins shouted as Khazra approached. His towering figure radiated menace amidst chaos surrounding them. With every ounce of strength left within him, Hawkins raised his rifle once more, determined not just for himself, but for everyone fighting alongside him. Khazra's eyes glimmered with malice as he drew closer. There was no turning back now. This would be a fight for survival. As both sides clashed in an epic showdown, the battlefield erupted into chaos once more. A storm of gunfire and energy blasts filled the air around them. Hawkins fought valiantly against overwhelming odds. Each shot fired became an act of defiance against tyranny, a testament to resilience forged through unity. But just when it seemed like victory was within grasp, Khazra lunged forward with deadly precision, claws aimed straight at Hawkins' heart. A sacrifice made. In that moment, a flash of movement caught Hawkins' eye. Dr. Drayle had returned from leading his team. "No," Hawkins yelled as he saw Khazra lunging towards Dr. Drayle instead, but it was too late. With one swift motion, the general struck true. Dr. Drayle fell lifelessly to the ground, a sacrifice made in defense of hope. Hawkins' heart shattered at witnessing such loss, but anger ignited within him like never before. "No more," he roared as he charged forward, fueled by grief and rage, determined not just for revenge, but also for honor. With every ounce left inside him, he faced Khazra head-on, a final stand against oppression itself. The defining moment. In that moment, the battlefield transformed into something greater than mere conflict. It became a symbol of unity between species fighting side by side against tyranny. With one last surge of strength, Hawkins unleashed everything he had left. Their combined might surged forth like an unstoppable tide. Together, they would reclaim Zorks from darkness, even if it meant sacrificing everything along the way. As energy crackled around them, the clash between light and darkness reached its peak, a defining moment that would resonate throughout history itself. In that instant, they became more than just warriors. They became legends fighting for freedom, a legacy forged through bloodshed and bravery. And so, the battle raged on, but hope flickered brightly amidst chaos, a reminder that even in dire times, unity could conquer all.